Hey everyone, what is going on? What is going on? My name is Curtis Brooks. I am a men's life coach. I help men communicate their way to healthy relationships. I am doing this broadcast, guys, on LinkedIn, YouTube, and also on my personal page on Facebook. So if you are so inclined to jump into the comments and you have questions regarding this broadcast, feel free to do so. It has been on my heart. It has been in my heart, and men are who I coach, and it has been it has been a challenge, and so I wanted to do this broadcast tonight. Though it might be a little late for some people. It's 9 o'clock Eastern time on the East Coast, but nevertheless, I wanted to do this broadcast because men are who I work with, and it's just a lot that we're going through, and I'm not doing this broadcast to for sympathy and say, "Oh yeah, we got to help." No, 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 no. I'm doing this broadcast essentially for men. So if you are a wife, a girlfriend who's got brothers, uncles, husband, whatever the case might be, or nephew, whatever, uh, have them tune into this broadcast. So we're going to be talking about some wonderful things. But nevertheless, we are streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and also LinkedIn once again. So tonight's broadcast is entitled, look at here, When Sons Don't Become Fathers. When Sons Don't Become Fathers. And actually, I'm speaking from a more of a biblical standpoint. And that's just who I am as a Christian. So that's the angle that I'm coming from. And so if you have any questions, we can absolutely answer any questions that you might have related to some of the things I'll be sharing with you. Again, it is from a biblical standpoint. So, as a believer, this is part of my coaching style is to get working with men from a more of a biblical standpoint. But that being said, guys, we're talking about when sons don't become fathers. When sons don't become fathers. So, in this discussion, I'll be sharing actually even some of my own experience, and one being raised by a single mom for many years. Give me a second here, guys. Being raised by a single mom for many years, my mother was. Uh, I was. My mother was a young mother, I should say, and so I didn't grow up with my biological father, and there's a lot of history with that I'll probably never know, such as I'm sure with some of many of us, many of you as well. But that being said, so not growing up with my biological father, it made it a real challenge because I think I was different from a lot of other men or young boys, I should say, and not so different, but I desired that male role model in my life, and I was desperately looking. I can remember literally looking, just wanting to just I felt myself as a young person wanting to just really trying to connect with men, older men, and later on, I would find out in life that a lot of what I was looking for, I would have to become it myself. And so, in doing so, or even before I got to that place, I found myself just having to develop a relationship with Christ and uh, foregoing my hope, if you will, foregoing my hope to become that man that, or at least by the eyes of, through the eyes of that young kid who was looking for that physical person to kind of coach me, if you will, that would take me under their wings. And I was, again, desperately looking for that physical person in the earth realm, that is, to coach me and just again to mentor me, to help me get to that space. And I didn't find him. I didn't find him. But throughout the course of this journey that I'm taking in life, I would find out that I would have to become the father that I was looking for. And through a lot of pain, and that's probably the understatement of the year, but through a lot of pain, I arrived at a place where I was comfortable with who I had become. Um, in this journey, I began to look at things differently from a lot of other men. And I think when we try to line these things up, guys, give me a second here. I'm trying to find this broadcast on my phone here. Probably should have had this stuff together here, but I'm trying to make sure it's over on YouTube because I don't see any questions. If anyone had any questions, but nevertheless, uh, in my journey to become a man, and becoming a man or becoming a father more so, and then boys eventually become men, but there's a difference when the sons remain sons, and I experienced a lot of that growing up as a kid because I was raised by a single mother, and though my stepfather was there, for whatever reason, he didn't play a real significant role, and I would probably attribute that to my mother just maybe not feeling comfortable with being with a stepfather. I don't know, but could have been a lot of different things. But nevertheless, he was there, but he wasn't there. But he was an awesome provider, and so. Uh, for me, I grew up from a place of just uh, trying to find that relationship. And I found that mom can only do so much. I discovered that mom could only do so much in how she relating to me in the best way she could. And I could relate to her as the best way as I could. And so through my relationship with my mother, became really close, great relationship. But it came to a point in my life as I got older that, and I remember telling my mom, sharing this conversation with my mother on the phone at one time, and I said, "Mom, I feel like my course with you, our discussions. I mean, we've always had great discussions, but I felt, Mom, that your discussions it had reached a level where that okay, where do we go from here?" And so there ensued my journey to become a man, and again, not just any man, a father. And I didn't know that's what I was looking for. Yeah, I would forever be my mother's son, but there's a difference when you are growing up to become a godly man, and we absolutely look at things differently. And there are some godly men who are, again, still having challenges, and that's a fact of life. That's just life. But in this walk with life, in this walk with as a Christian, as a believer, it's definitely not without its challenges by any stretch of the imagination. And just because you become a Christian or a believer does not mean that the issues go away. And it really is important to know that. So, as I was ensuing my journey to become a father, or at least trying to become connected with other men, I would soon discover that I needed to become the father that I was looking for. And it was a burden that I had inadvertently, through no understanding of my own, it was a burden that I found myself placing on other men because I wanted to uh, I wanted something, and I believe that those men had something to share with me. And it's not that they didn't, but I found out that a lot of the men were in searching for the same thing I was looking for. And so it would be years later through a course of just several different relationships, marriage, and a child now, or he's an adult now, but nevertheless, a child at some point, and later in life, around I think I was 32, I would have a child. So it would be later in life where I would find that through my relationship with Christ, that things were unfolding, and they were unfolding, and the pain was also unfolding. I was being exposed. I was being um, I felt like I was being used by someone or something. And this conversation is not about trying to convert anyone. I just kind of felt, just needed to share that. It's not about trying to convert anyone, but it is about looking to a source that is greater than ourselves. And with our limited understanding as men, as people as whole, women to include children as well, with our limited understanding, the only options that we have is for that limited information to go in a circle, and we can maximize that information. But the challenge in maximizing that information is that it really has us just where we're at right now. This is what we're dealing with right now. This is a result of us maximizing that information as much as we can, and again, and its limitations. So for me, as a believer, I would find that the only way for me to come up, or at least step out of this sonship into a father, become a father, I had to willingly subject myself to understanding, to a teaching that was different from my own. And in doing so, I discovered that it's men who are in suits that are hurting. It's men who are wealthy that are hurting. It's men who are in leadership roles who are hurting. It's men who are pastors who are hurting. It's men who have been married for years, love their wives, but they're hurting. It's men of all backgrounds hurting. Men who are poor that are hurting. Men who fall on the scale of, or somewhat middle class, who are hurting. Men of all backgrounds are hurting. So this broadcast is about men who are hurting. It's about men who are being challenged in all areas of life. It's about men who have information but feel like, where do I go with this information? It's men who desire to be better than they were, or better than their fathers. It's men who are desiring to change their outlook on life. It's about men who are battling with substance abuse, or be it alcohol or drugs, or verbal abuse, physical abuse, mental, emotional abuse. It's about these men who are hurting because as a result, and I'm not condoning their behavior by any stretch of the imagination, but as a result, these men are hurting, and they have long been ignored. They have long been ignored. And again, this broadcast is not about a sympathy call. It's about a cry out to men. It's about creating a safe space for men to come and talk, to have a discussion, to have a great conversation, to get insight on what they may be dealing with. It's about men who are troubled in different areas. It's about men who are searching for answers. And so, what I discovered in regards to men or sons who don't become fathers, what I discovered is that there is a emotional deficit that they're dealing with. And being raised by a single mother for many, many years, uh, there was an emotional deficit that I was dealing with as a man. And uh, oftentimes, men who are raised by their mothers, as single mothers, they're dealing with emotional deficits, if you will. And maybe I should say the logical deficit, because in most cases, women are more emotional than men. And it's not to say that men can't be emotional, and a lot of them are. But a lot of men lean towards more the logical side. The emotional side is absolutely important, but because men lean towards the logical side, we have a tendency to invalidate our emotions, and that's definitely not a good thing. Having that balance is absolutely needed for men to have, but oftentimes we as men we don't have that balance, and when we don't have that balance, again, being raised by single mothers, we have a deficit of some sort, and we have a tendency to be more emotional rather than logical, rather than thinking things through. And one of the things I've learned with men is that when men are not, when men, as men, when we can't figure something out, or when it does not make sense to us as logical creatures, when it does not make sense to us, we lean towards the emotional side, the side that's almost like a child, if you will, that has his temper tantrum because he can't figure it out because he doesn't understand. It does not. He can't reason. He can't wrap his mind around it, and because he can't wrap his mind around it, or the inability to wrap his mind around it, uh, men have a tendency to get emotional. And when they get emotional, they become absolutely irrational, meaning that the reasoning goes out the window. Any kind of rationale that could possibly make sense, it doesn't make sense to them. And it's almost like they have to be pulled down, or, pulled down from a ledge or something, or talked off a ledge, because when we get to that place of emotions, sometimes it's hard for us to come back. And the reason why it's hard for us to come back as men is because the emotions, the emotional side of for us as men is oftentimes a space that's undealt with. And like I said, this broadcast is on YouTube. It's also on LinkedIn. It's also on Facebook. And even before I did this broadcast here on LinkedIn, I was like, okay, well, what do I talk about? And I quickly understood that, wait a minute, as I mentioned earlier, is that even men with suits, who wear suits, men who are in leadership, men who are heads of companies, or Fortune 500 companies, Fortune 200 companies, whatever the case might be, even these men are hurting. They're going through something. And here is the remedy for a lot of what we're going through, is that we have to have a space to be able to communicate. We have to have a space where we can share the 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 results of our day, good, bad, or indifferent. And many times we don't have that space. And taking it a step further, oftentimes even when we're given that space, as men, we're dealing with something much heavier, perhaps of our past, perhaps of, again, the challenges that we may have had with our own father, challenges that we may have had with our mother. And as a result, uh, as men, we have a tendency to, uh, this means that we have a tendency to mistreat women as a whole. When, as men, when our relationships are not a healthy relationship with our mothers, we have a tendency to have that leakage spill over into our relationships with women who are outside of our relationship with our mothers, our wives, our girlfriends, significant others, or whatever case might be. So we have a tendency as men, when we're not together, I should say, for lack of a better word, when we're not rightfully in our right place, and this is coming absolutely from a biblical standpoint, when we're not in our right place as men, we have a tendency to, again, lean towards the emotional side, and consequently, we are less logical. We are more prone to uh, grabbing hold of something without doing the research, without making it make sense. We're more prone to probably the gossip a lot of times that we that we hear from, that comes from women. A lot of times we can gossip like women. And again, it just ultimately prevents us from coming into our role as fathers in our relationship. And when our relationships are not to the space or to that place of having a healthy relationship, not only with our wives, but with our children, it's a repeat of what we've dealt with as children or their lack thereof. And when it's a repeat, it can be, I mean, it can almost feel like you're going in this spiraling, there's a spiraling effect, if you will, this downward spiraling effect. So it's important that we as men uh, begin to seek higher understanding. And in this broadcast, I want to talk about three types of men that I discovered in the Bible. And this is going to come out of the book, uh, the King James Version, the book of John, uh, chapter 7, verses, let's see, chapter 7, verse 1 through 10. This is the first type of person. And this individual is what we call the centurion soldier. And I believe it's a Roman soldier, if I'm not mistaken. So in this situation, this Roman soldier had heard of Jesus. Jesus had been healing people and things of that nature. And the Roman soldier, the centurion soldier, he had heard of Jesus, but yet he had he had not actually approached him, and so he had sent his men or delegates, so to speak, men who were underneath him, subordinates, to send a message saying that his servant, the centurion soldier's servant, was ill, and he cared about this servant. So he had sent a message for ahead of with his servants for Jesus to heal heal his servant. And so in doing so, Jesus gets this message, and the servants give the message to Jesus, and Jesus said, "Well, wait a minute. I can go ahead and go to his place, come to see him in his place, where where the issue is, where the servant is sick." And then the centurion soldier sends yet out another message that says, "No, I'm not worthy." He wasn't worthy, but he said to Jesus, "Well, I am also a man who is under authority, saying to one, go here, and yet to another, go there." And so he understood the authority. And Jesus said to the man, the centurion soldier, that he had not seen such faith, even yet in Israel. So this centurion soldier didn't come from Israel. He was not an Israelite. He was not even a believer. But he understood the authority. And so at that same moment, or a time had passed, as the servants, the centurion soldiers' servants, were on their way back, they hear that the servant, the centurion's servants, the servant that was sick, that he is now healed. And the centurion soldier inquired, said, well, wait a minute, what time was that spoken? That Jesus had said, your servant is healed. And it was discovered, it was the same time that it was discovered that at that particular time or that hour, the centurion soldier says, well, wait a minute, that's the same time that he was healed. So the centurion soldier believed Jesus, saying that, again, recognizing Jesus' authority. That's one man. The second man is the man who came by night. His name was Nicodemus. He came in the evening time, looking for a remedy, searching for something higher. And yet, even during his plight to search for something higher, yet we come into the third man. The third man was you and I. The third man was you and I. The man who, I'm looking at my notes here, the man who feels that his authority has been been challenged or undermined. And when men feel that their authority has been undermined or challenged, oftentimes we're battling with the truth. We want to arrest those things as the Pharisees had come to try to arrest Jesus. So as men, when we're battling with the truth of new information that's been sown as seed, if you will, when we're battling with new information and it doesn't fit into our box, if you will, it doesn't fit into that place of reasoning for us. And being that the thoughts of Jesus was higher than our own thoughts, we couldn't wrap our mind around it. And as men, and then would even go as far as say people as a whole, because we cannot wrap our minds around it, we are subject to try to arrest that very thing. We're subject to lean towards trying to put that very thing that was meant to bring us out of something. We're subject to try to take hold of that thing and now make it subject to us. And there's something about the truth is that you can't, you can wrestle with it, but it will absolutely cause you heartache. And I think the challenge with a lot of us as men, we're wrestling with the truth. We're wrestling with the truth that is absolutely present, a truth that is absolutely available to any man who wants it, to any man who desires to change your situation. There's an absolutely truth for it. Though we may wear this thing differently, if you will. We may all dress it up differently, but there is a truth for each of our situations. But a lot of times, we don't do like the first two men, like the centurion soldier did, who was not even a believer. And to mention also Nicodemus, he wasn't a believer. He was a Pharisee. He didn't believe in Christ. He believed in the law of the Jews, which was the first five books. I can't remember off the hand right now. The Torah. They call it the first five books of the Bible. So he believed in the first. These men. That the centurion soldier was a Roman soldier. Nicodemus was a man who was a Pharisee. He didn't believe, but he had come to Jesus by night. But yet, there was the third man. The third man was essentially the Pharisees, who were presented with the truth, such as many of us, myself, my walk with Christ as a believer, presented with the truth. But then we can absolutely find ourselves fighting with the truth because the truth does not fit into our own understanding. The truth is not profitable at that time, though it absolutely can be profitable to our lives in the sense of healing. And that's what many of us need, is we need healing. Because when we don't receive the healing, maybe saying, Curtis, well, how does what you just mentioned tie into healing? Well, here's how it ties into healing. Because until we as people men as a whole, until we as men can tap into what the real matter is, what the real issue of our hearts is, we can forever and a day find ourselves dealing with that, the remnants of that pain, if you will, dealing with threads of it, or just ideas of the pain coming back and disappearing and coming back and showing up at those weird times of the day. So healing is absolutely necessary in the way that when we're healed as men, the healing shows up in healthy relationships. The healing shows up in how we respond differently. And we can see it. This is the wonderful thing about the healing. We can absolutely see it. But until we decide to take upon the truth that sets us free, if you will, individually and even collectively, until we decide to settle upon the truth that sets us free, we will forever be sons. To walk in a place of fatherhood is a painful place. To walk in a place of fatherhood is a place where it feels like you're not going to get a whole bunch of attaboys. Oh, you did a great job. To walk in a place of fatherhood, it means that there can be absolutely some lonely days. Again, this broadcast is not done to conjure up uh, sympathy from anyone, but yet for men to understand that sonship is one place. And that's where I think a lot of us as men are. We're still in a place of sonship, but we're desiring to take over the Father's business. And the Father isn't quite yet ready to give us the business yet. But we want it though. We want to take over the Father's business. But he's saying, yeah, you're still not ready. But in making us ready, if you've ever done any garden for or having planted a tree or plants or anything, vegetables or whatever the case might be, there are times where you'll have to prune your plants, pull off the dead leaves that are still hanging on. You might even have to cut the branches, if you will. And this is how God does with us. This is how life is sometimes. The branches have to be cut. And there are things and places that life, or I would imagine that God is trying to take us as men, or at least bring us into fatherhood, to make sure that we're taking care of our wives, to making sure that we are the head and not the tail, to make sure that we are taking responsibility and raising up sons who will become fathers. And again, this is no small job, but in the process, you have to be cut with the truth. It's as if you have to be cut. Our hearts have to be, in many ways, we're going to be disappointed. We're going to have to deal with unmet expectations. Again, further drawing on that disappointment. Well, I had hoped for this, and I wanted this, but I got something completely different. So this is where I'm at right now. And it looks nothing like I had desired when I was a youth. It looks nothing like that. But what happens when we don't get what we want? How do we deal with that? What happens when we get parents, or we're born to parents that we thought should have been this way? They should have been wealthy. They should have been this and been that. We don't get what we want sometimes in life. It happens. And as God is building us up as men, again, whether you're wearing a suit, whether you are a leader of a large organization, manager, supervisor, it doesn't matter. a lot of what we're dealing with in this world that we're living in right now, we're dealing with men who are still sons, have taken on the responsibility, major responsibilities, but they're still sons. And I could tell you what keeps us as sons, what keeps us at a certain level as sons and lacking the capacity to move forward is that we haven't dealt with our pain. We haven't dealt with our hurt. We haven't dealt with those nuances that are just really distracting us throughout the day. We haven't dealt with disappointment from our mothers, disappointment from our fathers. We haven't dealt with disappointments that showed up in life. And obviously, this could be women as well. But for men, we have not dealt with these things. And because we have not dealt with these things, it prevents us from walking into truth. It prevents us from, excuse me, it prevents us from walking into a greater understanding. It prevents us from having any depth to us. It prevents us from going beyond what is surface. It prevents us from looking into a matter with hands that are untainted and that we can see into something. It prevents us from making the connections with that emotional side of us. And yes, obviously, men can be emotional. We have emotions as well. Yes, we do. But when we're not healed, the lack of healing, it prevents us from walking into our purpose. It prevents us from making connections with our wives, our children, our subordinates as leaders. It prevents us from growing the organizations that we are desiring to grow. Because when we're not healed, many of the things that we touch, that lack of understanding is absorbed through it. And it shows up in so many areas of our lives. And so it ends up unqualifying us. We can believe that we're qualified. Absolutely, I can do the job. Pick me, pick me, pick me. I can take over, Dad, I can take over the business. But because a lot of times in life, myself included, when I've desired things and they didn't come when I wanted them to come, there was a huge level of disappointment. And absolutely, I needed to be healed from those things because disappointment is it's a it's big. It can be very big. And what I mean by big is that it can affect so many areas of our lives. Not only with growing your business, starting a business. And once you started your business, trying to grow it, trying to maintain the business. Going from a solopreneur or a proprietorship, a solo business owner, I should say, to expanding your company, to managing people, and from managing people to, being able to speak in front of people, being able to deal with our families. So this space of what so many of us as men are dealing with it really can be solved. It's just that the things that we begin to, we start to value things more so than the healing. And once we're healed, the benefits and the benefits of healing can absolutely reap us so much more. So we remain limited in the access to the Father's business, or the access to the dreams, or fulfilling our own purpose is often denied. Not because we're incapable, not because we're not worthy, not because we don't look the part for the job. Because ultimately, God knows the heart. And there's a scripture in the Bible that says, from the heart comes the issues of life. And oftentimes those issues touch and taint everything that we lay our hands to. Everything that we touch, we lay our hands on, such as our wives, our significant others, our jobs. So our ability to understand is also uh, tampered with, or lessened, I should say, because of our inability to see, our inability to confess our own truths. And because we're unwilling to confess our own truths, not to me, but to yet a higher source that offers understanding that I myself have been searching for. And again, this conversation is not so much about trying to convert anyone. Absolutely not. But it is about a truth that is offered to any man who is seeking. Any man who is seeking help with, be it a substance abuse, be it physical, emotional, mental, verbal abuse, there's help. But it first starts with us as men saying that, hey, I got some work that needs to be done. Hey, that's mine. Yeah, that's mine right there. What I said to you, I shouldn't have said. I apologize to you. Shouldn't have said that. I could have absolutely said that differently. But again, oftentimes because of our lack of healing, it's hard to find the words to that will suffice for that conversation that we're having with whomever, because we're not healed. And this is not a topic that men want to talk about often. But I'll be the first to step out there. Obviously, I'm not the first to step out there, but I'll take up the mantle and have this discussion because men are hurting. Men are hurting all over the world. And it's a conversation that absolutely that needs to be had. So as we're wrapping up this broadcast, and I apologize if there's been any questions. For whatever reason, I am not getting any comments. Let me see if I can release. Da, 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 da. Oh, wow. Yes. Okay. I apologize there. Lenora is here, comment on the screen here. Lenora says, how do men begin to deal with their pain? Wow. Yeah. So, Lenora, thank you for that question. I do apologize. I'm just looking at this comment right now. And I think you are over on YouTube. So, thank you for watching. Um, yeah. So, and as far as men dealing with their pain, and I think I alluded to this or mentioned this earlier, is that we first have to be honest with ourselves. it's hard to know how much money you have in a bank if you have not looked at your bank statement. If you, and I think life in itself, it we can just spend. It's kind of like swiping that credit card, if you will. We spend, we spend, and we swipe that credit card again and again. And at some point, you've got to check the balance. You got to know what you have in the account. And I'm certainly guilty of that as well. And at different times in my life where uh, I knew it wasn't much in there, but I didn't want to look. I didn't know. I didn't want to know the damage I had done financially to my bank account by swiping that card or that credit card or spending to an exorbitant amount of money. I didn't want to know the damage because if I looked at what I spent, I'd have to deal with the lack. I had to answer that question. So I think that uh, in answer to your question, Lenore, thank you for the question. Again, I'm not sure how long the question has been over there, but again, in answer to your question, men have to first be prepared to say, "Hey, I got an issue. I have a challenge. I'm challenged in this area," and I think for me personally, I've had to say, for me, it's been consistency, having to be consistent with a lot of different things, and one is actually doing live streams and just being on camera. I'm for the most part an introvert, and having to break out of that. So even though I can feel uncomfortable, but nevertheless, I have a purpose to fulfill. I have an assignment. I've been given an assignment, been given a task, such as many of us as men and women alike. And so uh, we have to be able to, even in the fear, if you will, we have to be prepared to address those situations and do it even while we're in fear, do it while we're afraid. And so I hope that answers your question, Lenore. So thank you for that question. So if anyone has any other questions, we're also on Facebook. We're also on LinkedIn. Didn't see any questions coming from LinkedIn, so let me see if I can take another look here. Okay, so all right, at this time we don't have any more questions. So as I stated earlier, this broadcast is absolutely a cry out to men, a cry out to men, and whether you're on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, doesn't matter. This conversation is a cry out to men. Uh, this conversation is about creating a safe space for men because we absolutely need it. And there are men who are hurting. And I just want to say, yeah, I feel your pain. In some ways, I've been there too. So whether it's financial, whether it's death to a family member, whether it's substance abuse or any kind of abuse, physical, mental, emotional, and all these different things, some parts of my life have been there as well. And so throughout this conversation, I'm absolutely going to be very transparent with you because I think transparency is what heals people. I'm not looking to come from a level of being a scholar or any such thing. No, that's not what heals people. Information is great, but at the end of the day, people need men also obviously women too, but people need for people to make those connections on levels where they can participate. They can be a part of the conversation where I can say, "Hey, I know your pain. I hear you." So all right, guys, I hope that I have answered any of your questions. Again, this broadcast is more so a cry out to men. It's the clarion call, so to speak, to men in regards to letting you know that I hear you. So, you can't hide behind the suits, which we often do. We hide behind our value, or at least our purported value, how we feel about ourselves. We can hide behind those things and try to cover up the pain and things of that nature. But yeah, I hear you. Uh, uh, it's a cry out. So I hope this information that I've shared with you has been valuable. I hope this information has made sense to you. Absolutely. I hope that's made sense to you. I hope that if you have any questions, you will absolutely reach out to me. You can find me on YouTube as we're broadcasting live on YouTube, and we are. Let's see, what's the name? I think it's Life Coach for Men on YouTube. That's the call sign for YouTube. It's Life Coach for Men, and then also on Facebook. That's my personal page. You can search for me. Can't remember how to get there, but anyways, you can search for me on Facebook and also on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn with this broadcast that will be posted to LinkedIn. So if you don't have any more questions, let me check really quick for any more questions. Again, Lenora, thank you for that great question. All right, I think that's going to be it. So, all right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. And again, thank you for tuning into this broadcast. Once more, my name is Curtis Brooks. I am a men's life coach. I help men communicate their way to healthy relationships. So we will see you next time, guys. Ciao for now, and I will talk to you later. Bye bye.